Today we will take a look at the art of Loish and try and analyze her paintings and style. Then I'll try to do my own painting in her own style. You'll see me fail the first time and we'll try and understand why the painting didn't turn out the way we wanted it. And then I'll do another study where the results are much better. So when I was looking at some of the paintings and some of the drawings, you can see the sketch is usually very loose, and you can see that there's a lot of lines that she uses. And I've also watched some of her videos where she's doing the sketch and the paintings, and it really follows a flow. So she really tries to have the feel of the painting to follow a certain flow. For example, we can see in this painting here, there's a flow that goes this way. And then in some of the other ones, we can see the flow of the hair going the other way. So flow in the gestures and flow in the sketch and the drawing is very important in the way she does a lot of her paintings. And then the other thing is the stylization is usually, as I mentioned before, big eyes as we can see here. And then we have the really small nose. And then the face is generally compressed. The features are compressed in this smaller area compared to a regular face. So when we look at some of her paintings, we see that generally speaking, there is one main color and then we have another secondary color that helps push the painting and give it that look. So for example, here we can see the majority of the painting is that blue, and then we have the light here that adds that focal point, and then we have a little bit of the same light reflected off a certain parts there. So here, for example, we can see a lot of this is that red color, which is the light, and then we have the secondary color, which is at the top, where it provides that contrast between the light and shadow. So I really like the way they do this, where there's this secondary light source that provides this extra light, and it gives that unique look to the painting. If these things weren't there, for example, a lot of the painting would just be that blue color, which will still work, but then with the addition of this light source, we can see that light source here and here in these flowers, we can see that the light that's reflected here on the face and parts of the hair. So this combination of this look and the stylization, and then the use of different colors and different light colors really helps push the painting to the next level and give it that style that we all see and we all know. So first I wanted to start studying the sketch, and I wanted to keep in mind some of the things that I talked about before. So as I mentioned, try and have the face a bit compressed so that the facial features are closer to each other. But as you can see, this is something that I'm not used to, so I struggled quite a bit getting those proportions well. And then I tried to do another one with a different angle here. Got a little bit better, but again, the way she does the nose, how small it is and how compressed it is, was a little bit challenging for me. Then when it came to studying one with color, this was very interesting for me because I noticed that there's a lot of color variation in the brush strokes, but at the same time, there aren't too many colors. So what I mean by that is that we can see that, for example, parts here of the nose, that red orange color is used quite a bit, but then here there is that cooler color and it fluctuates between those. And then here we have a little bit more of a desaturated grayish color there, and that's all part of the reason of the light source. Then something to notice here is that a lot of these brush strokes are left in there, and we leave that painterly look into the painting. So you can see, for example, there isn't that much blending here, for example, and it's really the brush stroke remains there. So then I wanted to do a painting of my own, trying to replicate some of these things. So as usual, I started with a sketch, and as you can see, I tried to push the limit to get it to that stylized look, but still, because it's not really something that I'm used to, the stylization was a bit tricky for me. And you can see some of the facial features don't really match, especially the nose doesn't really match the style of Loish. But I decided to keep going and try and see how I can push the colors and add the colors into my painting. So I decided to start with the base colors as being blue. So as you can see, I put the whole face as blue and then the hair as a darker, more saturated blue. Then I wanted to start blending in. So I used just a brown brush to try and add some color variations in there and consider the secondary light source. So I decided to have a more reddish light source coming from the right side of the image, and then it would really capture most of the face and most of the character. But I wanted to start with that blue undertone first. And then I just kept rendering in and adding in more light and shadow pieces and adding in more color variation in there to try and get that look. And you can see using those colors was a bit of a struggle because these are not normal colors that I usually use for face and for rendering. But I decided to just give it a go and continue trying to render that. And then every once in a while, I would just pick a textured brush and add some of the highlights in that texture with that texture brush to make a little bit of, or to give it a little bit of a different look. Now, when it came to the hair, I picked again another texture brush and first started adding it in big brush strokes. So I added that pink purple color into the hair first. I did the whole thing using that textured brush. Then I realized that in a lot of the paintings that Loish does, she doesn't really use texture brush too much for the hair and uses a lot of a softer rounder brush mostly. So I went back on and created a layer and really with big brush strokes again tried to add and remove most of the texture there. And then finally I just decided to add a little bit of background to add a little bit of a story to this painting. So after I finished that painting, I realized it doesn't really look like Loish style, and if you look at it, you don't really see the resemblance of that style. So I decided to do another try and another painting, and this time I chose these two as my reference. And because the stylization was a little bit tricky for me, I decided to use Loish's painting as a reference a lot more heavily and then combine it with the other photo to do my study. So one of the things that I learned from my first attempt is that during the sketch phase, I think the stylization needs to be there. So for example, the nose in my first one wasn't really stylized as much as I wanted it compared to Loish's style. And then the face, how squished the proportions are, also wasn't there. And I was trying to fix it at the end with a liquefier tool, but it didn't really work out. So this time during the sketch phase, I really made sure the stylization of the big eyes, the small nose, and the squished face and proportions are there. And then even the hair, the way the hair is stylized, almost like ribbons, I wanted to make sure that during the sketch phase that is reflected there. So as you can see, the sketch phase here is a lot better and resembles the style a lot more. And then I decided to go in and paint. So painting, I started with the base, and then, so the idea here is that there is a red light that is directed towards the face a little bit from the bottom, and it's adding that red light to parts of the face and parts of the hair, while the top part of the face doesn't get that light and doesn't get that color. So I wanted to make sure that when I'm painting it and adding the colors, I reflect that. As I was coloring it and looking back at this reference, I noticed that the concept that top of the head is more yellow and the bottom is more blue and the middle is more red is really applied here, even though the colors may not be exactly that, is that as you can see, the bottom part is a lot more cool. So I tried to use a cooler red there, and the top is more yellow. I use a desaturated yellow there as the base color generally, and then left it there. And then the center had more reddish, like the nose had more red and the cheeks had more red. And then just using light and shadow, I rendered more and more. And then the other thing that I learned about Loish is that it's okay to leave some of the line art back in. So I wanted to make sure I add that in there. And then when it comes to the hair, that idea of it being ribbons is really important. And it was a bit tricky, but I tried, but thinking about it that way and really spending the time to try and do it that way gives you that stylization. So I try to apply that. And then when it came to coloring it, you can see that I put the top part as purple, and then the bottom where the light is more towards the red, and then try to blend in the in the shadow areas, put more of that purple, and then in the areas where I think that light hits it, add more of that red color. So the top part is more purple and the bottom part is more red, and then pieces that are extending from the top to the bottom side of it transitions from purple to red. One of the most important things that I have mentioned about Loish's paintings is that there is an element of storytelling. So even though it's just a portrait sometimes, there's still some element of storytelling. It could be in the environment, it could be in the facial features, it could be just in the way the light is reflected in some parts. So what I wanted to do is add a little bit of movement by adding these. They're just a textured brush, and I added a few of those with just simple brush strokes, and then I added motion blur to those pieces. So I had them on two different layers, one in the background and one in the foreground, and I applied different amount of blur to them. And then it kind of goes with the movement of the hair. The hair is also moving towards the right, so that motion blur adds a little bit of an effect. And I wanted to try something also so I copied the character, and then I also added a motion blur to the character, and then erased most of it and just had that motion blur on the right side of the painting. And this way I have a little bit of that motion blur effect on the character as well. But really this style was a bit of a challenge for me because I'm not used to the colors, I'm not used to the style, the stylization of it. But I think what Loish does, and something that I've learned a lot here, is there's a bit of storytelling with the colors. There's a bit of storytelling with the flow of and the composition of the image. Even though sometimes it's just a portrait, there's still something unique to each painting that gives it a little bit of a story that guides your eye towards a certain part. And having those things all together really gives the painting the unique look. So I think although the style maybe, or the study may have not been a complete success in replicating the style, what I think I can take away from it is that I can play around with the colors more and add more bold light sources into the painting, and then also think about the flow. Adding flow to the paintings where, for example, the hair flows a certain way, or the clothing or the way the eye is looking can guide you into a certain way into the painting and make the painting look a little bit more exciting by adding the element of storytelling.